Welcome to EPG Pathsala. I have prepared the module Women's Representation in Political Parties. The most developed country in the world, United States of America, popularly known as America, is a democratic country. Even in the country in which we are living, that is India, we have also democratic form of government. What is democratic form of government? It is a government which is controlled and run by the representatives of people. Now the question arises, how these representatives are prepared, they are selected, they are given training in political field, how they develop political skills, and how they become the future leaders of a country. There are many such questions which needs to be answered. But the most important thing is that the answer of all these questions lies with political parties of a country. Political parties, it is the political parties which recruit, nurture, develop leadership skills among the party members and produce future leaders. Thus, political parties play very important and meaningful role in a democratic setup. That's why we know political parties are called gatekeepers of democratic setup. If we want to have gender balanced political system, it becomes necessary to represent all genders in appropriate manner in the formation of a government of a country. But what we find, though women constitute 50%, more or less 50% of the world population, but still they are underrepresented in almost all the countries of the world in political system. Political parties should play a very positive role here. If more and more women are included in the political parties at every level, at the local level, at the regional level, at the state level, at the national level, then these women political leaders would be able to play very important decisive role in the decision making process as well as in the formulation of policies of a country. Suppose a student has to appear in examination and his examination schedule is prepared by someone else. He may put 100 excuses for not following his routine. But if he prepares himself the routine, then he will try to follow that routine with dedication and sincerity. Similarly, if women are in government, then they will try to manage all the policies and they will look after the particular needs and interests of women, and they will help in the formulation of policies which will be particularly beneficial for the women. If women are included, then our political system will be gender friendly. It will become more gender friendly. If more and more women are included in the political setup of a government, then their visibility, of course, these women will act as models for other women, and they will try to become, more and more women will try to become the part of the political process and the government of a country. These women Further, these women may contribute in the development of a humanistic aspect of the administration and government, which is otherwise insular. So there is a need to include more and more women in the political life of a country, and it is possible only through the political parties, because we know political parties play a very important role in any democratic setup. It is obvious from the just concluded election in UP, and in 2016 election, only on the name of BJP more and more seats went to the party. So party can play a very important role. They can train women to become the future political leaders of the country. So I have chosen this model, and so more and more women can be included, and I chose this module to highlight all those factors which have prevented women in coming to enter into the politics of the country or become the members of the political parties. Women's representation in political parties. In the first segment, I have dealt with definition, role and functions of political parties. Definitions by some leading political thinkers have been given in my module. I would like to read one or two. Countries should not become fit for democracy but fit through democracy. It is the definition by Amartya Sen. A well-known definition of political parties comes from the American political scientist Anthony Downs, who wrote, "A political party is a team of men seeking to control the governing apparatus by gaining office in a duly constituted election." The 2002 Human Development Report, "A well-functioning democracy depends on well-functioning political parties responsive to people." In many countries today, political parties are an essential part of the apparatus of governance. Ideally, they play a fundamental role in the exercise of democracy. Political party is basically a group of dedicated and sincere people who believe in common ideology and come together to form the government, formulate policies and protect the interests of all segments of society in a country. K. Lawson analyzes the role of parties as agencies for forging links between citizens and policy makers. Lawson identifies 4 types of links: participatory linkage, in which parties serve as agencies through which citizens can participate in government; policy responsive linkage, in which parties serve as agencies for ensuring that government officials will be responsive to the views of rank and file voters; linkage by reward, in which parties act primarily as channels for the exchange of voters for favors; and directive linkage, which parties are used by governments as aids to maintain coercive control over their subjects. Now, I would like to analyze some major functions of political parties. The most important function of political party is to conduct and organize elections. A political party is first of all an organized attempt to get power. Power here is defined as control of the government. Political parties play the fundamental role in the democratic process in selecting and socializing prospective political representatives and leaders, as well as in advancing a gender equality perspective within the political party system. Political parties formulate public policies, represent the views and perspectives of citizens, both men and women, and channel these into appropriate public policies. Political parties educate, formulate and organize public opinion. They also help in the growth of the level of political consciousness of common citizens. Thus, political parties are an important instrument and institution of politics in a modern democratic system, which represent the will and the interests of the citizens as authentically as possible and articulate and integrate different interests, visions and opinions. Now, what is the need for the inclusion of women in political parties? Why do we need women's representation? It's a major question. Though all over the world, gender equality, we are making tall claims about gender equalities, but what we find in reality, in most of the countries, women are underrepresented in political system. Theoretically, democracy should be positively linked to increased women's participation in politics. Democracies generally include gender equality in their constitutions, allow women's groups and movements to mobilize in pushing for gender equality, and reduce formal and informal barriers that deny women access to political power. However, even in the early 21st century, the goal of achieving meaningful gender equality in politics continues to remain elusive. Today, women cast ballots in equal or even greater numbers than men. Yet, women continue to lag behind men as party members and campaign activists, as candidates running for legislative office, as elected members and leaders of local councils, regional assemblies and national parliament, as members of the judiciary and top civil service, and in the highest positions as cabinet ministers and heads of government and state for elected office. The empirical evidence suggests that women are still underrepresented in the parliaments all over the world except few countries. As of September 2013, women constitute only just in excess of a fifth of legislatures in lower houses across the world. This is widely viewed as a democratic deficit given that women constitute 50% of world's population. The severe underrepresentation of one half of the population not only limits the diversity of parliaments but also contradicts one of the central tenets of representative democracy. When we talk about representative democracy, that means every segment of the population should be properly represented, but that we do not find with women. This situation persists in spite of the fact that equal rights for women, including rights to citizenship and suffrage, are guaranteed in the constitutions of all modern democracies. Thus, to make democracy more gender balanced and to enable women to participate in the national decision making process, there is a need to include more and more women's representatives at every level of government. Electing greater number of women to public office will build confidence among women, contribute to strengthening legislative and policy agenda, and increase trust by the electorate in the political system. Recent research shows that women are less corrupt, they are more honest, they are more lively in making the administration successful. So, keeping all these facts in view, we should make our politics, our polity more and more gender friendly. The presence of women in elected office may lead to a broader positive changes in the social and cultural perceptions of women's capacity. That means, since time immemorial, we do not see women as capable leaders. Though in India, we have a number of women leaders, even before independence and after independence. They have held highest offices in the world. In India, like President Pratibha Patil, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, she was the Prime Minister of India for a long time. Then we have a number of women who are Chief Minister heading the state, they are Chief Ministers, like late Jayalalitha. Then at present we have Mamata Banerjee, Miss Mamata Banerjee. Then Miss Mayawati was the Chief Minister of UP. So all these women put before us examples that women can also be very good leaders. The presence of strong, capable women in public office can result in changes in societal perceptions and can help combat gender-based stereotypes and discriminatory attitudes. A range of studies have found that female politicians often serve as role models who inspire other women to become politically involved as citizens, party members, and political activists. Evidence suggests that the inclusion of women's voices, especially when addressing complex challenges, broadens the diversity of viewpoints, experiences, interests, and expertise brought into parliamentary debates. Electing more women from different backgrounds and political parties can further enhance these positive effects by allowing women's views to be channeled into public policy discussions. Women's inclusion in decision-making process will also lead to the advancement of policy issues that are important to women, such as child care, equal pay, and protection against violence. Now we see presently the government has increased the duration of maternity leave only to promote to manage women's problem when she becomes a woman, become mother. Women and political parties. Though women's representation in elected office in any given country is determined and influenced by a number of factors, such as the design of political and electoral systems, the degree to which decision-making processes are institutionalized, and the broader economic and cultural developments in society, but the political parties and the process by which they are governed play a key role in determining the degree to which women participate in political and public life. Referred to as the gatekeepers of democracy and of women's political participation in particular, political parties have failed to provide adequate representation of women. In view of this, in its 2012 resolution on women and political participation, the UN General Assembly urged all state parties to strongly encourage political parties to remove all barriers that directly or indirectly discriminate against the participation of women, develop their capacity to analyze issues from a gender perspective, and adopt policies to promote the ability of women to participate fully at all levels of decision making. Given the important role of political parties, it is essential that political parties should develop and apply different voluntary measures to promote women's participation as party members, decision makers, and candidates for public offices. Now, what are those challenges which are basically preventing women to become the part of the government in more and more numbers? The first point is candidate recruitment selection. Candidate recruitment and selection processes that are not formalized or written down can be easily manipulated or ignored by party leadership to the detriment of potential women candidates. Obviously, if laws are not written, it can be flouted at any stage. Thus, a party should promote more transparent, fair, and suitable process for candidate recruitment and or selection. The number of women selected as candidates by party leaders can give a clear indication of whether or not a party is biased against women. For example, if a political party claims that half its members are female and that its female members hold leadership positions, but selects less than 20% of women to make up its candidate list, then it may be an indication of gender-based bias in the party's candidate selection process. Promotion procedure. How a member in a party is promoted. Procedures for party promotions that are not institutionalized in party documents may result in political advancement based on connections rather than on merit. Unequal access to and distribution of party resources. One key obstacle to increasing women's participation is unequal access to and distribution of party resources. This is due to inadequate funding of women candidates on the one hand and the high cost of campaigning on the other. Thus, unequal access to as well as allocation of party resources disproportionately affect women, who often have less access to external patrons and support networks and less experience in fundraising. Now, what is the party culture? What type of culture is prevailing in a particular party? It matters most. Party culture, including traditional means of communicating, socializing and campaigning, can be reminiscent of old boys clubs that marginalize or openly discriminate against women or perpetrate gender-based stereotypes and double standards. I would like to add one point here, that when we talk about party culture, it should always be formulated by keeping in the social and cultural environment of any society. Then only we can have real party culture which will promote women's more and more participation. Then next we have party operations and functioning. Modes of party operating including working hours, holding meetings on the evenings and weekends and other social requirements can conflict with women's other responsibilities, particularly if there is a lack of balance in family roles. Party culture can be particularly discriminative when it reflects the prevailing norms of the broader political culture. For example, the qualities deemed necessary for political success are often viewed positively in men: authoritative, ambitious, driven, tenacious, principled. If a woman possesses all these qualities, then it turns to be negative for her. Why? If she is aggressive, she can't be a caring mother, can't be loving wife. So we have to keep all these in mind when we are talking about the inclusion of women in political parties. Next is patriarchal society and male chauvinism. One of the most important barriers that women face within a party is gender-blind party regulations. The founding documents of political parties often do not include measures to support women's advancement and can be written in a language that directly or indirectly discriminates against women. We know in India, the grassroots women leaders who participate in panchayati elections, they do not know even Hindi in better way as compared to their native language. So we will have to keep all these factors in our mind while promoting women's inclusion in party. Then we have other institutional aspects: long and late working hours, unenforceable rules, informal practices and unwritten customs serve as further constraints. Now, what measures should be adopted by parties to increase participation of women in political parties? The most frequent and the most recently used system is the quota system. Recent studies show that quotas, legally binding quotas and party quotas, are significant means of increasing women's participation in politics and decision making bodies. While the legally binding quota is either guaranteed by the constitution or by statute law, political party quota are adopted by individual parties and incorporated into their rules. Generally, legally binding quotas take either the form of reserved seats or candidate quotas that participate in a given election. In general, such quotas are very efficient as they guarantee a certain number of seats in parliament or on a candidate list. In addition to this direct effect, legally regulated quota rules should also have an indirect and more psychological effect encouraging women to seek political involvement because they know they might succeed. Similarly, political parties also have dual influence on women's representation. On the one hand, they have a direct influence on higher women's representation. On the other, if parties make sure through their rules and regulations to nominate a set number of women for parliamentary positions, these will definitely increase the overall percentage of women in elected offices. In addition, if parties pledge to nominate 30, 40 or 50% women on their lists, other parties with no quota rules may be influenced to follow suit by nominating more women. Following classical sociological approaches and modernization theory, governments and parties in most materialist countries might respond to pressure from women's movements to implement quota rules to provide for a more equal representation of women in politics. For the last 20 years in India, women are trying to pass the reservation bill for women's reservation in Lok Sabha elections, but still they have not succeeded. Further developed and affluent countries might also have the means and control mechanism necessary to enforce the quota provision. In contrast, party structures and political institutions tend to be developed in less affluent countries, making the implementation and supervision of quota provision more difficult. Then we have encouraging the creation and or strengthening of the role of women's sections, wings or other gender equality bodies within parties. The present parties which is ruling India, that is BJP, have a women wings, Mahila Morcha, then Congress also has a women wing, but other parties do not have women wings. So these parties should encourage other parties to create women wings within the political parties. Party leaders alone do not always have the expertise, resources or time to introduce the changes to party statutes, bylaws, policies and strategies that are necessary to promote women's political advancement and encourage greater gender equality. An efficient and effective means of capitalizing on the gender expertise of party members where it exists is to support the establishment or strengthening of women's sections within parties. Women's section, also referred to as women's wings, are internal party bodies established to facilitate women's participation in the party. They can understand if a political party has a women wing, then these women leaders can promote other women at the grassroots level to join party in a large section, in large numbers. So that will be the benefit. They can play a key role in promoting women's political advancement by advocating on issues of concern to members, supporting women's leadership development and helping to select potential new members and candidates, as well as providing resources and or support to women running for public office. Institutionalizing gender equality within party structures, processes and practices. It focuses on strategies to introduce gender equality as a principle and gender balance as a goal in party documents, processes and procedures. Undertaking a gender audit is an important first step in identifying gaps in party statutes, processes and practices related to gender equality. A political party gender audit or self-assessment is a methodology for assessing party processes, procedures, structures, culture and activities from a gender perspective with the aim of identifying discriminatory practices. Gender audits are not meant to be undertaken as ends in themselves, but rather to provide the necessary information a party needs to improve its policies, procedures, strategies, structures and activities in favor of greater gender equality. It is a tool to equip political party leaders with the necessary information to adjust its political party policies, programs and campaign strategies as regards gender equality. A party can establish an internal working group comprised of party activists, decision makers and gender experts to undertake a gender audit within a specified period of time. Then we have develop gender action. For the effective implementation of the suggestions of gender audit, a party should develop gender action plan which may include different components such as conduct a gender audit of internal party procedures, develop and build party leadership for a gender equality action plan, strengthen party founding documents, include women's sections in party statutes by laws, gender equality mechanism, women's section, enhance internal party democracy by making party processes more transparent and fair, adopt internal party measures to promote women as leaders and candidates, conduct internal party awareness raising, develop concrete party platform positions on gender equality related issues, link party recruitment and promotion to gender equality efforts of prospective and actual members. Then providing skills based training to women. It is very necessary. In India, though Panchayati Raj, women have almost 50% reservation, but due to the lack of knowledge, due to the lack of training, they are puppet in their hands, in their husbands' hands, even as political leaders at the grassroots level. So the political parties should concentrate on this matter. Research shows that providing skills based training, specifically enhancing women's skills in campaigning, media management, public speaking, meeting procedures, fundraising, etc. is beneficial for women candidates. Recently in British Conservative Party, women have initiated campaign with the goal of providing women with the skills to wage effective political campaigns. All women receive training in Australian Labour Party. Providing financial incentive and aid to women candidates. Political parties should adopt certain measures to provide financial incentive and aid to women candidates during campaigns and while they hold public office. Some political parties offer women candidates breaks on membership dues, registration forms and other campaign expenses to increase women's participation in the political process. Then again, fundraising for women. Another important issue for women candidate is fundraising, which has become particularly important as the cost of political campaigns have definitely increased up to a maximum level. Political parties can play an instrumental role by providing women with equal access to public funds and creating special funds raising networks for women candidates. Then we have providing women a forum for policy lobbying and discussion. Political parties should provide women forums for political lobbying, policy lobbying and discussions, as it may be critical in putting women's issues on political agendas and creating intra-party alliances to advance women in politics. Australian Labour Party's Labour Women's Organisation holds its own conference every year to give women an opportunity to discuss political issues, to lobby on specific issues and to network with each other. ALP also has a women's policy committee that influences party policies. Bringing effective changes in parties' organizational structure and ideology. This is very important, again very important. Parties' organization structure, ideology, the proportion of women party activists, parties' gender related representation rules and parties' leadership affect the proportion of women's participation. Party with left orientation may be more likely to support women candidates because left parties espouse egalitarian ideologies. We have the example of Mamata Banerjee. Traditionally, the women's movement has been linked to left parties. However, the rise of a new politics cleavage adds a new dimension to our conceptualization of ideology. New set of issues like environmental equalities, alternative lifestyles, minority rights, participation and social equality add new dimension to left ideology. Thus, new left parties may be even more closely linked to the women's movement and may encourage women to run for office. With more and more women active at different levels within a party, especially at high level, may encourage more women in parliament, may lead to the adoption of candidate rules and can add the direct pressure necessary to create and implement gender quotas and goals. Thus, what we find, political parties are the gatekeepers to parliamentary office through direct and indirect efforts can increase the proportion of underrepresented women in parliament. However, these measures need to be accompanied by initiatives to actively encourage and support women within parties to advance their political careers. Global experiment. Now, how parties in different countries of the world, they have promoted women to in holding highest political offices. In the last few decades, in many countries, the adoption of party quota has become very popular. Quotas for women candidates contesting elections, which started in Argentina, a very small country in American continent, in early 1930s, has been rapidly adopted by other countries. Legislated quotas percentage for women candidates in political parties have increased up to 50% in countries like France 50%, in Korea 50, Nepal 50, Belgium 50, Tunisia 50, Panama 50, Mauritania 50, Costa Rica 50 and Bolivia 50. In many other countries, it varies from 20% to 40%. Countries such as Argentina, Mexico and Costa Rica, through legislated party quotas, have over 36% female representation in their national legislatures. South Africa, Germany and Sweden have successfully achieved similar levels of female representation through voluntary quotas by political parties, with women comprising 44.8% of its current National Assembly. South Africa serves as an excellent example of a successful experiment with voluntary quotas. Party quotas. The important thing is that the voluntary quotas for women in South Africa emerged largely from women's organizations within the African National Congress itself. Global experimentation with different forms of women's reservation is both inspirational and an early warning for India. IDEA has summarized the global experience with quotas in following words. In almost all political systems, no matter what electoral regime, it is the political parties, not the voters, that constitute the real gatekeepers to elected offices. Women's wing, a success story. Creating women's wings of political parties is not a new phenomenon and has been promoted by parties and women activists since the last century. The Social Democratic Party of Sweden established its women's branch in 1920. Imagine, in 1920, and now includes over 300 local women's clubs throughout the country. Another good example is the Women's League of the African National Congress in South Africa. The advocacy efforts organized by the ANC Women's League against all forms of discrimination and gender imbalance led to the ANC resolution that 1/3 of its representatives in parliament must be women, which had a far-reaching effect in transforming the newly elected Democratic Parliament of South Africa. Mexico's Partido da Acción Nacional is yet another example. It transformed its women's wing from a women's social organization into an effective base for promoting women's entry into mainstream leadership positions. Now look at the Indian scenario. What is the Indian scenario? Though women have held the posts of President, Prime Minister as well as Chief Ministers of various states, still India has a minimal percentage of 10% women elected representative in the present national parliament. Globally, this number is double at 20%. How dismal is the situation, you people can imagine in India. The severe political underrepresentation of women in elected office as well as in political parties presents a very grim situation for gender equality in India. An analysis of Election Commission of India data highlights that in the outgoing 15th Lok Sabha, only 59 of the 543 seats were occupied by women. Even in terms of the number of candidates who contested elections, the scales were tilted vastly against women. Of the 8,070, only 556 or 6.9 were women. Female candidates fielded by parties in 2009 in India. National parties 24%, state parties 5%, registered unrecognized parties 34%, independents 37%. Source is Election Commission of India. Thus, only 29% of these women candidates were ticket holders of national or state political parties, while 34% of the female candidates belonged to registered unrecognized parties, 37% ran as independents. This has been the trend for women candidates since 1989 in India. Though political parties in India have increased outreach among women voters, women turnout during India's 2014 parliamentary general elections was 65.63% compared to 67.09% turnout for men. State-wise voter turnout in general elections 2014, Government of India 2014. But as far as the number of women ticket holders from these parties is concerned, it is significantly low. The number of women ticket holders from state parties fell sharply from 66 in 2004 to 27 in 2009. It may be the topic of research. It forms the topic of research. Because why? When we are making so much hue and cry for gender equality in every aspect of life, that is political, economics and society, but still the number fell from 66 to 27 in 2009. For national parties, the number of women candidates actually increased from 110, that is 110 to 134, but nearly 60% of this increase is credited to the BJP alone. Election Commission of India is the source. In the 16th Lok Sabha election in 2014, 61 women have secured seats in the Lok Sabha. We have maximum number of women parliamentarians from the state of West Bengal, where left party is ruling the state exactly since independence, I think so. It is 14 out of 42, that means 30%. And in the National Assembly, we have only, Lok Sabha, we have only 10% women parliamentarians. Not a single woman representative has been selected from Haryana, Meghalaya and Jharkhand. Now imagine the situation of these states. Not a single woman has been represented in the Lok Sabha. Though the three largest national parties in India, that is the Indian National Congress, the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Communist Party of India, have created women's wing, but unfortunately they are not fielding enough women candidates. It is highly ironical that Congress Party is headed by Ms. Sonia Gandhi, Trinamool Congress is led by Ms. Mamata Banerjee, AIDMK had led Ms. Jayalalitha as its chief, and BSP has Ms. Mayawati as its supremo, and yet there are not enough representations of women in these political parties. What are those factors? We will have to identify those factors which are really preventing women to enter into the political field. However, it is interesting to note that different political parties make tall claims about women's inclusion in every rank and file. According to the Constitution of the Indian National Congress, 33% of the seats in different committees are for women, 33% of members of the executive committee should be women, and 33% of the seats for the All India Congress committee should be reserved for women. Similarly, Rule 9 of the Trinamool Congress Constitution reserves 33% of seats in different committees for women. Even the Aam Aadmi Party has a ruling that 7 of the 30 members in its highest executive body be women. But see the reality. But the challenge among Indian political parties is that these impressive constitutional rules are seldom followed. In the case of INC, only 5 of the 42 members of the party's executive body, the CWC, are women. Similarly, 6 of the 57 AICC members are women, and only 4 of the 14 members of their election committee are women. See the reality. However, 30 of 35 state screening committees for elections don't have a single woman. This is about the Indian National Congress, the largest party in India and the most oldest party in India. Data from Trinamool Congress and AAP are also far from satisfactory. Within the Trinamool, none of the 30 presidents are women, and only 2 out of the 8 general secretaries and 1 out of 14 secretaries are women. The party has 10 frontal organizations in West Bengal, of which only one, the Trinamool Mahila Congress, is led by a woman, All India Trinamool Congress office bearers. The AAP has 24-member national executive, of which only 2 are women. This is significantly less than the 25% benchmark stated in their constitution. Both the BJP and the Congress were severely criticized by the Communist Party of India for their failure to pass the Women's Reservation Bill in Parliament, stating that denying women their place in elected policy making institutions is a subversion of democracy. Ironically, the CPI itself has failed to adequately represent women in the party's top leadership positions. There is only one woman in the 12-member Politburo, and only 11 out of the 74 central committee members are women. BJP is the only party from which the data is encouraging. Its experiment with internal party quotas has been more successful. In 2007, the party changed its constitution to include 33% reservation for women, following the recommendations of a committee led by Ms. Sushma Swaraj. This was followed with another amendment in 2010 that increased the number of women in cadre posts. The powers of the BJP Mahila Morcha are clearly defined. At the national level, the national president of the Mahila Morcha serves as an ex officio member of the Central Election Committee, which is responsible for making the final selection of candidates for the state legislatures and parliament, as well as administering election campaigns. Similarly, at the state level, the president of the state Mahila Morcha serves on the state election committee. As a result of these changes in BJP, we find certain improvement in the women's representation in the party. 26 of the 77 members, or 33.7% of the BJP national executive, are women leaders. Women comprise 26% of BJP national office bearers. Despite these improvements, certain statistical data raise concern. Only 2 of the 19 members of the Central Election Committee are women. Out of the 12-member parliamentary board, there is only 1 women representative. There is no female representation on the economic, agriculture, security and legal groups. Consequently, we find that most political parties in India flout the rules of their own constitutions. The absence of women in party leadership position exposes the gender-biased patriarchal attitude of political parties in India. It also highlights the absence of a pipeline of women leaders. Our political apparatus has collectively failed to nurture women leaders, leaving it unprepared even if quotas in parliament be legislated. Therefore, Indian political parties must realize their critical role as gatekeepers in women's political participation. National parties like the BJP and Congress, or new parties such as AAP, Each have to evolve internally to facilitate a greater culture of inclusiveness and operational democracy. The Election Commission of India too can play a pivotal role by holding parties accountable for their stated rules and promises in their constitutions and manifestos. Then why women are important in political parties? The active participation of women makes democracies stronger. According to research, both men and women believe that government is more democratic if it includes a substantial proportion of women. Then women are viewed as less corrupt. Women are effective money managers. They manage home very well. Women help in establishing support groups for political parties. Now, what benefits women are going to have if they become the members of political parties? Women get opportunity to utilize their talents. Women can serve as catalyst for change on behalf of other women, expands the pool of women willing to go for public office, changes the perceptions of society and political stakeholders regarding women's capacity, strengthens confidence of women to influence policy agendas in parties and parliament. Now, the benefits for political parties. If there are more and more women in political parties, improves a political party's image and reputation. Formulating and publicizing a clear-cut policy in support of gender equality may have a positive impact on increasing the party's legitimacy, membership and vote base. Then, enhance party platforms and policy agenda. A large-scale survey of members of parliament undertaken by the Inter-Parliamentary Union found that more than 90% of respondents agreed that women bring different views, perspectives and talents to politics by introducing new perspectives into policy areas traditionally dominated by men, such as defense, security, economics and business. Women's role in peace and reconciliation efforts, conflict prevention, post-conflict rehabilitation and peace building more generally can bring new views on how to prevent, manage and resolve conflict. We have a separate discipline now, women, peace and conflict. In every university it is being established. Women also provide specific expertise on social issues like education, healthcare and welfare. It strengthens political parties' electoral or campaign strategies, diversifies electoral strategy by diversifying candidates. A national or regional list of candidates that reflects a cross-section of society can help maximize the potential electoral appeal of political parties to different groups in the voting public. Including more female candidates can thus help to get out the vote among women members of the electoral. Especially local community leaders tend to be chosen from among teachers, medical nurses, doctors, shopkeepers or small business owners, positions that women hold in large numbers. Female voters may feel inspired and motivated to vote if they see a woman running for office. Expands the party's pool of skills, knowledge and expertise. Inclusion of greater number of women into political party leads to the expansion of the pool of resources, skills, knowledge and expertise that women can bring to political parties. Combats falling party membership. The evidence suggests that engaging more women in politics provides tangible benefits for political parties. In many countries, the turnout of women voters is more in comparison to their male counterpart. A recent report of the United Nations Development Programme and the National Democratic Institute states that women can deliver the margin of victory for successful parties and candidates. Growing number of parties around the world have found that nominating more female candidates can be one way to attract women voters for the party. On the other hand, women once elected can strengthen the party in important ways in addition to the vital work that non-elected women perform at the grassroots levels. Benefits for society. Society in general benefits from the increased representation of women in political parties and elected office. Women's political presence can ensure that policy issues affecting women in particular are channeled into political debates. in raising awareness about gender-based discrimination in all spheres of political and public life and enhanced social economic development, women's greater presence is essential. Increase public trust in the political system. The presence of women in political office, both elected and appointed, can increase the political system's legitimacy and thus public confidence in the system. In addition, greater inclusiveness and representativeness of the electorate in political office can lead to greater political stability, constituting one of the most effective tools of conflict prevention. Impacts the policy agenda. A critical mass of women in politics can bring vital attention to issues that disproportionately affect women. Many countries the world over continue to face major challenges in achieving gender equality in the areas such as education, remuneration, labor market, military services, and social issues like health care, domestic violence, trafficking. If women are absent from politics or constitute only a small fraction of elected assemblies, such issues are not likely to be prioritized or addressed. Contributes to social economic development. There is some evidence suggesting that a higher number of women in elected offices lead to greater economic advantages. The World Bank argues that promoting gender equality is smart economics because it can increase output per worker by 3% to 25% across a range of countries. Countries that create better opportunities and conditions for women and girls can raise productivity, improve outcomes for children, make institutions more representatives and advance developing prospects for all. Promotes better understanding of gender equality issues in society. When elected representatives are able to define gender equality and identify the benefits of gender equality for society at large, there is a greater chance that these messages can be communicated in a positive way to citizens, both male and female. Otherwise, most of the male who are not familiar with women's studies or gender equality, they take that women are those women who are feminists, they are against male. This is a misconception which should be removed. Gender factors which may contribute in increasing women's representation in politics. Since the 1990s, the representation of women in parliament has become a focal point for gender equality campaigning both at transnational and national levels. Political scientists have undertaken numerous case studies to identify factors that foster increased representation of women. These analyses relate women's representation to various institutional factors such as quota laws, the electoral system type, and the strength of left-wing parties, to socio-economic indicators such as the GDP per capita, to contextual factors such as the number of women in the workforce, and to cultural indicators such as the degree of religiosity in a state. While the factors that contribute to higher levels of women's representation, that is quota rules, proportional representation, large districts, and an egalitarian political culture, all these have been quite clearly identified in Western countries. The same can't be said for the non-Western world, that is the developing countries. In fact, it may not be surprising to find that the factors impacting on women's parliamentary representation in developed countries are different from those in developing and underdeveloped countries. Compared to citizens of high-income countries, citizens in low-income countries tend to hold different or more traditional cultural values, face different economic realities, and live under different political conditions. The fairer representation of women in the workforce can create direct and indirect pressures for political parties to represent women within the party structures and in elected office. But in poorer countries, women lack access to higher education and work in low-paid jobs in the agricultural or industrial sectors, which are not considered viable for political participation. Thus, what we find is that even the female activity rate and their workforce participation is stronger in developed countries, and this makes visible chance of increased women's participation in representative bodies in developed countries. However, empirical evidence suggests some contrary picture. For example, in United Arab Emirates, which is materially highly developed, women's representation ranges from 0%, and in Rwanda, which is economically a very poor country, the percentage of women legislature is 56.3%. Even in some of the richest Western countries, for example, Germany and Denmark, women's representation has stagnated. But on an average, we find positive relationship between development and women's higher representation. From 1995 to 2010, women comprise 18.8% of all parliamentarians in high income countries, slightly greater than 15% in medium high income countries, and around 12% medium low countries and low income countries. Therefore, we may conclude that with development, political and individual freedom may lead to increased women's political participation. Strong international pressures to include more women in public decision making may also complement these. The 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights enshrines equal rights of men and women, including the right to participate in government. This declaration was followed by a number of international commitments in the areas of women's rights, most comprehensively in the 1979 United Nations Conventions on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW, the 1995 UN Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and finally United Nations Decade for Women. All these reflect a new international commitment to the goals of equality, development and empowerment for all women. Thus, spearheaded by national and international feminist organizations, international organizations, and the creation of parliamentary commissions on gender issues within national parliaments, legislatures around the world have seen the number of women representatives increase. This increase is particularly sharp in post-conflict states where the norm of a balanced representation of the sexes is frequently incorporated into the design of new institutional framework. As such, post-conflict countries such as Mozambique, South Africa or Timor-Leste have around 40% female representation, and in the case of Rwanda it is 56.3. Despite such advancement, the road to gender equality in political representation remains a long journey. After the presentation, it is evident that sound and smooth functioning of any government is directly, or we can say entirely, dependent on the women's active participation. If more and more women are included in the politics of a country, the administration as well as the government will be more humanistic and more inclusive. What we find, if more and more women are included, then the situation, then we can expect that the administration will be more transparent, more honest and more egalitarian. Because when we talk about representative government, it means most all the segments should be represented appropriately and adequately. Again, what we find, though women voters are equal or sometimes even greater in numbers as compared to male, but they lag behind as far as the membership in party is concerned, in the local bodies, in assemblies or in the national parliament is concerned. There in India, when we talk about India, in India the situation is still grim. Only 10% women are in parliament as compared to, we have only 61 candidates as compared to 543. See the difference. Just when we are going through the presentation, what we find in developed countries, it is the economic position, strong economic position of women that is making a large difference. So, in India, what we need, political parties should recruit more and more women. They should declare in their procedures and in their processes and rules that not less than 33% women will be fielded as candidates at both at the local level, at the regional level, and at the highest national level. Then only we can find any change in political field of India. Second thing, political parties should arrange for the training of women who participate in political life, because lack of education, lack of literacy, all these factors combined together, women are politically unaware class in India. Even in the rural areas, though women have been participating, they are participating in the local administration, but they are puppet in their husband's hand, their husbands are basically dictating them. Their husbands are basically dictating them. So, we will have to increase the participation of women in political parties and in the political field. We will have to see that first we change their socio-economic conditions. Socio-cultural conditions also play a very important role in women's political participation, especially in the country like India. Even in the presidential election in America, what we find, Hillary Clinton was defeated by Trump. It shows the deep-rooted patriarchal mindset, because Bill Clinton became the president of America, but his wife Hillary Clinton, who was the more appropriate candidate for the president, but she was defeated by the people of America. So, I think कि more and more women, if women are included in politics, the social and cultural perceptions regarding the capability of women will gradually change, and it will also lead to the more gender friendly political environment in India. Thank you.